The first time I saw the divorce papers, I thought it was a mistake. A clerical error. A misunderstanding. Something that could be fixed with one phone call. But then I saw my signature. And I knew something was wrong. My name is Emily Dawson. I'm 37 years old. And I never agreed to end my marriage. I remember standing in the kitchen, holding the envelope like it was heavier than paper should ever be. My husband, Daniel, was sitting at the table. Calm. Too calm. You opened it, he said quietly. Not a question. A statement. What is this? I asked, my voice already unstable. He didn't answer immediately. Just took a sip of his coffee. And that silence felt rehearsed. It's just paperwork, he finally said. Just paperwork. But the word divorce was printed in bold at the top of the page. My hands started shaking. I never signed this, I said. Daniel looked at me like I was being emotional over something technical. You did, he replied softly. A few weeks ago. You don't remember? That sentence didn't land like confusion. It landed like accusation. Like my memory was the problem. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't about paper. It was about reality being rewritten without my permission. I laughed at first. Not because it was funny. Because it felt absurd. I would remember signing divorce papers, I said, trying to steady my voice. Daniel leaned back slightly in his chair. You've been stressed lately, he said. You've been forgetting things. There it was. The shift. From facts to me. From document to my mind. I'm not forgetting my own divorce, I said sharply. He sighed like I was making things bigger than they were. Emily, it was a legal separation agreement first, he said calmly. You agreed to simplify things. You said you trusted me to handle the rest. Trust. That word hit differently. Because I did trust him. That was the problem. He stood up, walked to the counter, and placed another folder there. I didn't want to overwhelm you, he added softly. So I took care of everything. Everything. I opened the second folder. Final decree. Stamped. Processed. Filed. My stomach dropped. This is already finalized, I whispered. Daniel nodded. Last week. And then he added something that made the room feel colder. It's easier this way. For both of us. For both of us. But I didn't feel included in that both. I felt removed from it. And I suddenly realized this wasn't a breakup. It was an execution of paperwork I was never allowed to see coming. I stared at the final decree for a long time. Long enough for the words to stop looking like language. They turned into something else. Proof. Or maybe accusation. My name was there. My marriage wasn't. I never went to court, I said quietly. Daniel didn't look up. You didn't have to, he replied. That sentence hit wrong immediately. Didn't have to. As if my presence in my own legal life was optional. I didn't authorize this, I said more firmly. Now he looked at me. Calm. Measured. Almost sympathetic. Emily, you signed the consent form. I shook my head. No. I didn't. A pause. Then he exhaled, like I was exhausting him. You were there, he said. You agreed verbally. I recorded it for confirmation. My stomach tightened. Recorded? He didn't answer directly. Instead, he opened his laptop and turned it slightly toward me. A video. Me. Sitting at this same kitchen table. Smiling. Nodding. Saying words I couldn't remember saying. I trust you to handle the paperwork, my voice said on screen. The room tilted slightly. That's edited, I said immediately. Daniel closed the laptop slowly. It's not, he said. And then, softer. You were overwhelmed. You don't remember it clearly. There it was again. My memory turned into the problem. Not his actions. Not the document. Me. And for the first time, I felt something colder than shock. Doubt. Not about him. About what else I might not be able to verify anymore. That night, I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that video again. My voice. My smile. My agreement. But it didn't feel like me. It felt placed. Like someone had carefully arranged my identity into something convincing. Around 2 a.m., I got up and checked our shared email account. Something I hadn't thought about in months. There were folders I didn't recognize. Names of lawyers I had never contacted. And one thread marked. Emergency processing spouse confirmation. My hands went cold. I opened it. There were scanned documents. Copies of IDs. Digital signatures. IP confirmations. All tied to me. All verified. But I didn't remember any of it. I sat at the kitchen table again, staring at the screen. And for the first time, I asked myself something I hadn't dared to before. If I didn't sign it and I didn't authorize it, then when exactly did my life become something that could be executed without my awareness? In the morning, Daniel acted normal. Too normal. Coffee. Phone. Calm voice. As if nothing had shifted overnight. You look tired, he said. I didn't respond. I just looked at him. Searching for something solid. Something real. Did you use my identity without me knowing? I asked finally. He didn't react immediately. Then he sighed. Not surprised. Prepared. Emily, he said gently, you're spiraling. That word. Spiraling. Not answer. Not denial. Just another way to make me the problem again. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. If everything had already been processed, then I wasn't being convinced anymore. I was being erased on paper while still standing in the room. I stopped arguing after that morning. Not because I believed him, but because I realized arguing wasn't reaching anything real anymore. Everything I said could be reframed, softened, or dismissed. So instead, I started doing something he didn't expect. I started verifying. Quietly. Carefully. I called the court office. They confirmed the divorce filing. Final. Processed. Legally binding. I asked for the recording of the filing authorization. They said it was submitted electronically with verified consent. Verified. That word again. When I hung up, my hands were shaking, but my mind was strangely clear. Because something didn't match. Either the system was wrong or I was being replaced inside it. That evening, I confronted Daniel again. Not emotionally. Not loudly. Just directly. I spoke to the court, I said. He didn't look up from his phone. And? They say I authorized everything. That made him pause slightly. Just enough for me to notice. Then he smiled faintly. Then I guess that settles it. Settles it. Like truth was something that could be closed. I stepped closer. I want to see the original authorization method, I said. Now he finally looked at me. And for the first time, his calm wasn't complete. It's complicated, he said. Complicated. Another word that meant. Stop asking. I nodded slowly. And in that moment, I understood something I hadn't allowed myself to consider before. This wasn't about misunderstanding. It was about control over proof itself. And whoever controlled the proof controlled what was real. The next step wasn't emotional anymore. It was strategic. I stopped asking Daniel questions he could twist. And started looking for what he couldn't control. Paper trails. Independent records. Anything outside his version of reality. I visited a lawyer on my own. Not the one from our shared documents. A new one. When I told her everything, she didn't interrupt. She just listened. Then asked one question that made my chest tighten. Do you have proof you never authorized the divorce? I hesitated. Because that was the problem. Everything I had seen so far had proof. Just not truth I recognized. Back home, Daniel noticed the change immediately. You've been quiet, he said one evening. I've been thinking, I replied. About you. About us. About what us even meant anymore. He set his coffee down slowly. Emily, I don't like where this is going. That was the first time he didn't try to sound calm. Just controlled. I looked at him. Neither do I said. Silence. Then he softened his tone again. You're building a narrative that isn't real. That word again. Narrative. As if my life was just a story I was misinterpreting. But this time, I didn't argue. I just said, I'm building something I can verify. That night, I checked something I hadn't thought to check before. Bank access. My account. My personal logins. Some were still there. Some had been reset. And one line made my stomach drop. Account permissions updated by authorized spouse. Authorized spouse. But I was no longer married. At least not according to the documents. So who exactly had the authority now? And why did it still feel like I had less control over my own identity than I did before the divorce existed? The lawyer called me the next day. Her voice was different from before, more cautious. Emily, she said, I need you to come in. There's something unusual in your file. That sentence made my stomach drop immediately. Unusual was never a good word in legal situations. When I arrived, she didn't waste time. She turned the screen toward me. There are 2 parallel records, she said. 2. She nodded. One shows a standard mutual divorce filing. And the other? She hesitated. That one shows emergency spousal authorization submitted from your household IP address. I stared at her. That doesn't prove I did it, I said immediately. I know, she replied. But legally, it overrides everything unless challenged. Overrides everything. That phrase echoed in my head long after I left. Back home, I didn't tell Daniel what I had learned. Not yet. I needed to understand something first. So I did something simple. I checked the router logs, the network history. And there it was. Multiple logins from devices I didn't recognize. At times I wasn't home. At times I was asleep. At times I was certain I had no access to anything. I sat there for a long time, staring at the screen. Because the conclusion wasn't emotional. It was technical. Someone had access to my identity infrastructure. And they had been using it while I was still inside the house. That evening, I asked Daniel one direct question. When did you first start managing my accounts? He looked at me for a moment. Then smiled faintly. I didn't manage them, he said. I protected them. And somehow, that was worse. That was the moment everything inside me finally stopped trying to make sense of him. Because protecting doesn't require secrecy. It doesn't require access I didn't know about. And it definitely doesn't require rewriting my legal reality. The next morning, I didn't confront him. I pretended everything was normal. I made coffee. I answered his small talk. I watched how easily he relaxed when I stopped pushing back. That told me more than anything he had ever said. Control didn't need force. It needed compliance. And I had been unknowingly providing it. By trusting. By assuming good intent. By staying inside the system he built around me. So I started preparing quietly. I backed up everything I had collected. Emails. Bank logs. Router history. Legal correspondence. And then I did something he wouldn't expect. I stopped using shared devices entirely. New phone. New email. New identity footprint outside his network. That evening, he noticed I was different. You're distant lately, he said. I'm focused, I replied. He smiled slightly. On what? I looked at him for a long second. Then said the only true thing I could say without giving anything away. On getting my life back. His expression didn't change immediately. But something in his eyes tightened. Just for a second. Like a system detecting a threat it couldn't yet name. And I realized, he didn't fear my anger. He feared my clarity. The turning point didn't come with a confession. It came with a mistake. A small one. Almost invisible. I received an email from the lawyer's office. But it wasn't addressed to me. It was forwarded from Daniel's account. Subject line. Client cooperation update. My chest tightened immediately. I opened it. Inside were internal notes from my case, including a sentence that made everything freeze. Spouse maintains full administrative control over shared digital and financial authorization pathways. Shared. Control. Authorization. I sat still for a long time. Because that wasn't interpretation anymore. That was structure. And then I understood something I had been avoiding since the beginning. This wasn't just about one divorce. It was about how long my consent could be simulated before I noticed it was missing. That evening, I didn't go home. I went straight to the lawyer. This time, I didn't bring questions. I brought everything. When she saw the full file, her expression changed. Not confused. Concerned. This is no longer a standard divorce case, she said quietly. What is it then? I asked. She hesitated. An authorized identity consolidation within a marital legal framework. The words sounded clinical. But the meaning wasn't. It meant my legal identity had been absorbed into a system I didn't fully control. And someone had been operating it as if it was shared. Even when it wasn't. When I left her office, I knew one thing clearly. I wasn't trying to prove a misunderstanding anymore. I was trying to reclaim ownership of myself. I didn't go back to Daniel that night. For the first time, I didn't feel the need to explain anything to him. Explanation was part of the system. And I was done participating in it. Instead, I went somewhere I hadn't been in years, my own name in a clean legal context. A separate account file the lawyer helped me open, outside anything shared. It felt small. But real. Like the first piece of my life that wasn't routed through someone else's permissions. The next morning, Daniel noticed immediately. Not what I did, but what I stopped doing. No shared logins. No synced devices. No automatic confirmations. You're making things complicated, he said while pouring coffee. I looked at him calmly. Things were already complicated, I replied. I just stopped ignoring it. He paused slightly. Then sat down. His tone softened again. That lawyer is influencing you, he said. There it was. The familiar pattern. Externalizing my judgment. Removing ownership from me. I didn't react. I just asked one question. Why did your account appear in my legal correspondence? A flicker. Just a small one. Not fear. Calculation. Then he smiled faintly. You're misunderstanding administrative systems again, he said. Administrative systems. Not identity. Not consent. Systems. And that's when it clicked fully. He wasn't defending himself emotionally. He was defending the structure. Because if the structure collapsed, so did everything he built on top of it. Including my version of choice. I stood up slowly. And for the first time, I didn't ask for truth. I prepared to enforce it. The lawyer called me again, but this time her tone was different. Lower. Careful. Emily, she said, I need you to prepare for something unexpected. My grip tightened on the phone. What kind of unexpected? A pause. Then. A legal hold request has been filed. I didn't speak immediately. Because I knew what that meant. Freezing of assets. Legal containment. Control while the system investigates. But the next words changed everything. Filed by your husband, she added. I closed my eyes for a moment. Ex-husband, I corrected quietly. Another pause. Yes, she said. But the filing includes claims of shared authorization fraud and questions your mental capacity at the time of consent. There it was again. Not just control. Disqualification. Back at the apartment, Daniel was waiting. As if he already knew I had been notified. You didn't have to escalate this, he said calmly. I laughed once. Short. Empty. I didn't escalate anything, I replied. You did. He shook his head slightly. You're being influenced by outside pressure, he said again. Outside pressure. Not evidence. Not documents. Pressure. I stepped closer this time. And for the first time, I didn't feel afraid of his calm. I felt aware of its purpose. You used my identity, I said quietly. And now you're trying to label my awareness as instability. His expression tightened just slightly. Not anger. Control slipping. I protected you, he repeated. And I finally understood the full shape of the lie. Protection that requires silence. Consent that requires forgetting. And love that only exists when I don't question it. That wasn't protection. That was ownership disguised as care. The next step wasn't emotional anymore. It was legal collapse. The lawyer called me into her office early in the morning. This time, she didn't ask me to sit first. She simply placed a printed document in front of me. Emergency court injunction, she said. My eyes scanned the first line. And then stopped. Because it wasn't just about divorce anymore. It was about my legal identity being contested entirely. Daniel has filed to have your prior consent classified as non-valid due to alleged coercion and cognitive impairment, she said carefully. I looked up at her. So now I'm not just divorced, I said slowly. No, she replied. Now your past decisions are being legally questioned. That was the shift. Not separation. Reconstruction of reality. When I left the office, I didn't feel panic. I felt clarity so sharp it almost hurt. At home, Daniel was waiting again. This time, he wasn't calm. He was prepared. You need to stop this, he said immediately. I didn't answer. I just placed a copy of the injunction on the table. His eyes dropped to it. For the first time, silence between us felt unstable. You're trying to undo everything, he said. I looked at him. No, I replied quietly. I'm trying to confirm what actually happened. He exhaled slowly. And then said something softer. You don't understand what this will do to us. I nodded slightly. And answered. There is no us if my reality can be rewritten without me. That sentence stayed in the air longer than anything before it. Because even he didn't immediately respond. And in that silence, I understood something final. This wasn't a marriage ending. It was a system being exposed. The court hearing didn't feel like a battle. It felt like an audit of my own life. Daniel was there. So was I. But we were no longer inside the same version of reality. His lawyers spoke first. Words like authorization, shared access, and protective intervention filled the room. Each one sounded polished. Clean. Convincing. Until my lawyer stood up. And placed everything on the table. Not arguments. Not emotion. Data. Independent logs. Bank metadata. Device access trails. Timestamps that didn't align with the consent narrative. For the first time, I saw Daniel's expression change. Not anger. Not confidence. Calculation failing. The judge reviewed the documents in silence for a long time. Too long. Then finally. The court finds inconsistencies in the authorization chain, she said. A pause. Then the final line. The divorce filing is upheld. However, Evidence of unauthorized digital consent replication will be referred for criminal investigation. The room didn't react loudly. But something inside me did. Not relief. Not victory. Just re-entry into my own life. Outside the courthouse, Daniel didn't speak immediately. Then he finally said, "I was trying to keep everything stable." I looked at him. And for the first time, I didn't feel fear. I felt distance. "Stability that requires my absence isn't stability," I said. He didn't answer. Because there was nothing left to reframe. I walked away alone. Not because I lost something, but because I finally stopped participating in something that was never mutual. And for the first time in a long time, my life didn't need to be verified by someone else to be real.